Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something kind of mysterious, a little bit medical, and very much rooted in history and culture. You sent us, wow, a fascinating collection of articles, some even in Turkish, all about the history of autopsies, or actually, maybe more accurately, the LACK of autopsies, especially in Turkey.
It's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? You have this procedure that seems like it should be a fundamental part of how we understand disease, but it's surprisingly absent in this specific part of the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're missing a piece of the medical puzzle. And today, we're going to try to figure out why that is. And the sources you sent, well, they point to some pretty deep historical roots. We're talking all the way back to ancient Greece. I mean, even Hippocrates, the father of medicine, he was advocating for autopsies. But even HE faced some resistance.
And it's really interesting, the nature of that resistance, right? It wasn't just about, like, the practicalities. It was about, well, these deeply held beliefs about the sanctity of the body after death. And that's something that, we see running through history, especially in the Ottoman Empire. And as you know, that had a huge influence on Turkey.
Okay, so even thousands of years ago, we're already seeing this tension between medical curiosity, wanting to know, and cultural beliefs. And you're saying that the Ottoman Empire's stance on this is what really set the stage for how autopsies are viewed in Turkey today.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we look at the big picture here, the Ottoman Empire believed that it was disrespectful to disturb the body after death.
Yeah.
And that had a really profound impact on medical practices in the whole region. And that impact, well, we can still feel it today.
Which brings us to that statistic you sent, the one that's kind of startling. The autopsy rate in Turkey today is as low as 3%. That's incredibly low compared to a lot of other countries. So what does that tell us, really, about Turkish healthcare today?
Well, I think it raises some important questions. One of the Turkish excerpts that you send in talks about a case where an autopsy revealed a hereditary heart condition, one that had gone undiagnosed. Imagine if that information had been available sooner. Without autopsies, there's a chance, a real possibility of missing crucial diagnoses, of not truly understanding why someone died, and really missing opportunities to learn from those deaths and improve how we practice medicine.
Yeah, that one example really kind of makes it real, doesn't it? It's not just numbers. It's about real people and maybe even preventing some tragedies in the future. But you mentioned something else, right? It's not just cultural beliefs that contribute to this low rate. You said there's some practical challenges too, right?
Right. It's not just one thing. It's more multifaceted, I guess you'd say. A lack of resources, especially in public hospitals, is a big factor. Think about it. Autopsies need specialized facilities, trained staff, equipment. All of that is costly.
So even if doctors see the value in doing autopsies, there are these hurdles, these practical hurdles that can prevent them from actually happening. It's like a roadblock on the path to to medical knowledge.
And it's not just that. There's often a lack of awareness among the public, too. If people don't understand why autopsies are important, they're less likely to consent to one for themselves or for their loved ones.
Okay, so we've got this web, right? This web of cultural beliefs, resource limitations, lack of public awareness. And honestly, it paints a kind of bleak picture, doesn't it? But we've only really just started scratching the surface. You mentioned that Turkey has a rich medical history. So what can we learn from that history, especially from the Turkish sources you sent in?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Let's dive into those Turkish excerpts, shall we? See how they shed light on the evolution of medical practices in Turkey. It's this story of tradition meeting modernity. It's about these pioneers pushing for change. And a medical landscape that's, it's still really evolving. One of the Turkish excerpts you sent, it highlights this pivotal moment, the establishment of the first faculty of medicine in Istanbul, back in 1841.
Oh, wow. 1841.
Yeah, and this marked a big step toward formalizing medical education in Turkey, moving away from just relying on those traditional healing methods.
So it's like a turning point then, a shift towards a more, westernized approach to medicine.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing that transition, that probably wasn't easy, right? Especially with, the cultural context that we were just talking about.
You're right. You're absolutely right. The excerpts actually point out that even as those Western practices were being introduced, they often clashed with those traditional beliefs. For example, when they introduced autopsies as part of the med school curriculum in the late 1800s, it faced a lot of resistance.
It's so interesting how, these historical events kind of reveal this tension, this ongoing tension between embracing new knowledge and holding on to those, deep-rooted beliefs. It's like a balancing act, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And it's a process that's still shaping, the medical landscape in Turkey today.
Yeah.
But even with all that tension, there were these individuals, these people who really championed autopsies. They recognized their value for pushing medical knowledge forward.
Oh, that's interesting. So who were they? Who were these pioneers that were, brave enough to kind of challenge the status quo?
Well, one prominent figure that your sources highlight is Dr. Hamdi Suat Aknar, a real trailblazer. I mean, he was the first Turkish physician to actually specialize in pathology, the study of disease.
Uh-huh.
And he really understood that autopsies were, they were essential if you wanted to truly understand disease processes.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, if you dedicate your life to studying diseases, wouldn't you want the most complete view possible, even after death?
Exactly. For Dr. Aknar, autopsies, they weren't just about saying, oh, this is why this person died. They were about, it was about unlocking these secrets,
Hmm.
the secrets of disease and finding ways to get better at diagnosing those diseases. And he didn't just talk about it. He actually went and established the very first dedicated autopsy room at Ankara Numuni Hospital
When was this?
back in 1935 when he became the head of the pathology department there.
Wow, he really put his beliefs into action, didn't he? Creating the infrastructure to make autopsies more, routine, I guess. It sounds like he laid some serious groundwork for, future pathologists in Turkey.
He really did. His contributions were huge. I mean, really instrumental in shaping pathology in Turkey.
Right.
But even with all his efforts, the excerpts suggest that the rate of autopsies, it remained pretty low overall.
So those deep-seated beliefs about the body after death, they continue to be a hurdle, even with people like Dr. Aknar fighting for change.
They did. The excerpts really highlight the influence, this enduring influence of Islamic beliefs about the sanctity of the body after death. And those beliefs are deeply respected, but they often made it hard for autopsies to be widely accepted. But it wasn't just the cultural beliefs either, right? There are those practical challenges too.
Right, right. You mentioned that resource limitations, especially in those public hospitals, could be a real barrier.
Exactly. The sources talk about the lack of things like dedicated autopsy rooms and a shortage of trained pathologists. Those were big factors that limited how many autopsies could actually be done. One source even says that some hospital administrators saw autopsies as an unnecessary expense.
And that's understandable, I guess, right? If you've got limited resources, you have to make some tough choices about where that money goes. It's balancing those immediate needs with long-term investments in knowledge.
It's complicated, yeah. And those practical challenges, along with those cultural beliefs, they help explain why the autopsy rate in Turkey stayed so low for so long.
Okay, so now we have a good understanding of the history and what's contributed to that low autopsy rate in Turkey. But what about today? Have things changed much in recent years?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the heart of the matter, right?
Mhm.
Where does Turkey stand with autopsies today? Even though all those historical and cultural influences we talked about are still there are some signs, some glimmers of hope, things that suggest maybe, just maybe, attitudes and practices are shifting.
Okay, I like the sound of glimmers of hope. Tell me more. What's changing in the Turkish medical landscape?
Well, one of the most promising things is that doctors, especially the younger generation, are starting to recognize just how important autopsies are for research, for education, even for patient care. They're realizing that autopsies can give you answers, insights that you just can't get from looking at a patient, even with all the technology we have today.
It's interesting how you keep coming back to this generational shift, right? It seems like it's really key to moving things forward.
It is. And it's not just because medical education is changing, but also because technology, especially in pathology, is advancing so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
We have new imaging techniques, genetic testing, molecular diagnostics. All these things are giving us more and more detailed information about the human body, about diseases, but they still can't replace a good old-fashioned autopsy.
So it's not that technology is going to replace autopsies. It's more like they're going to work together, right? It's like having more pieces of the puzzle, but you still need that overall picture, the one you only get from an autopsy.
That's a great way to put it. And as all of this technology keeps getting better and better, it'll probably make autopsies even more valuable, as we try to wrap our heads around all the complexities of diseases and how to improve healthcare.
Okay, so we have doctors starting to see the value in all this cool new technology. What else is making you feel optimistic about autopsies?
Well, the public is starting to catch on too. People are becoming more proactive about their own health care. They're looking for more information, demanding more personalized approaches. And autopsies, well, they fit right in with that. They can give definite answers and sometimes even uncover hidden conditions. So they align with that desire, that growing desire for knowledge and understanding.
So it's like people are realizing, hey, even in deaths, I have a right to know what happened. And they want answers not just for themselves, but for their families, for future generations.
Exactly. It's about giving individuals and families the power to make informed decisions about their health, even when they're facing loss. And as this awareness spreads, I think we'll see more and more people accepting autopsies as this valuable tool, a tool for making healthcare better and for advancing medical knowledge.
That's encouraging, but we can't forget about those cultural and religious barriers, especially in Turkey. How do you think those will be addressed in the future?
That's a great question, and that's where things get, well, a little less clear. Overcoming those deeply held beliefs, it takes sensitivity, education, a willingness to have these open, honest conversations where everyone feels respected. We can't just dismiss or disrespect those beliefs. It's about building bridges, bridges between what science tells us and those cultural values.
So it's about respecting tradition, but also showing the potential benefits of autopsies. That sounds like a tough balancing act.
It is. It requires time and patience. And it takes collaboration, collaboration between doctors, religious leaders, and the public. It's about finding that common ground where everyone feels heard, where decisions about healthcare are made with both knowledge and compassion.
So while we've got this hope for the future of autopsies, there are also some pretty big challenges. It's more like a journey, not just a destination, and we don't really know where it'll end up.
You got it. The future of autopsies, well, it's still being written. It's shaped by all these things, cultural beliefs, new technologies, changes in how doctors practice medicine and what society values. But I am optimistic. If we keep putting in the effort, keep those conversations open and honest, and stay committed to both scientific progress, cultural sensitivity, well, I think we can create a future where autopsies play a bigger, more beneficial role in healthcare and in how we understand the human body.
So we've covered a lot: history, cultural context, the medical side, the legal stuff, even what it means for society. It's been really eye-opening. It's crazy how something we don't really think about that much, autopsies, can be so tied to all these things: history, culture, ethics, even what it means to be human.
It really shows how complex the human experience is, doesn't it? And how powerful scientific inquiry can be.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? Well, the next time you hear the word autopsy, we hope you'll think beyond just that first image that pops into your head. We hope you'll think about the history, the science, the ethics, all the potential benefits for individuals and Andy for society.
It's about seeing autopsies as a beginning, not just an end. A source of valuable knowledge that can help us understand diseases better, improve healthcare, and maybe even appreciate those mysteries, the mysteries of life and death.
So much to think about. If this deep dive has got you curious, keep exploring. What questions do you have now? What about health, culture, history? What do you want to dig into more? Let us know. We love hearing from our listeners and diving into new things.
Or remember, knowledge is way more valuable when we share it, when we talk about it. So don't be shy. Connect with us. Keep the conversation going.
Until then, keep diving deep. There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting to be discovered, and we're here to help you explore it. Thanks for listening.
Well, I think there are a few things, actually. One of the biggest, I think, is that more and more doctors, especially younger ones, are starting to realize just how valuable autopsies are, for research, for education, for getting better at taking care of patients. They're seeing that autopsies can give you these answers, these insights that you just wouldn't get from a regular exam, even with all the technology we have these days.
You've mentioned that a few times now, this whole generational shift in how doctors are thinking. It seems like that's a really big deal for changing things.
It is. It really is. And I think part of it is that, well, medical schools are changing how they teach things, but it's also because technology is changing so fast, especially in pathology. We've got all these new imaging techniques, genetic testing, molecular diagnostics. All of that is giving us way more detailed information about the body, about how diseases work. But they still can't, they can't completely replace what you learn from a good old-fashioned autopsy.
So it's not like technology is going to make autopsy is obsolete. It's more like they're going to work together, right? Kind of like having more pieces of a puzzle. But you still need that big picture, the one you only get from an autopsy.
Exactly. You put it perfectly.
Yeah.
And as technology keeps getting even better, it's probably going to make autopsies even more valuable, especially as we try to understand these really complex diseases and how to improve healthcare for everyone.
Okay, so we've got doctors getting on board and all this cool new tech. What else is giving you that optimistic feeling about the future of autopsies?
I think people in general, the public, are starting to understand the benefits too. They're becoming more, well, I guess you'd say proactive about their health. They want more information. They want healthcare that's more personalized. And autopsies fit in with that. They can give you those concrete answers, and sometimes they can even find things, hidden conditions that nobody knew about. So they really do line up with this growing desire for knowledge and understanding.
It's like people are starting to say, hey, even in death, I deserve to know what happened. And they want answers, not just for themselves, but for their families, for future generations.
Exactly. It's about giving people the power to make choices, informed choices about their health, even when they're facing loss. And as more people understand that, I think we'll see them being more open to autopsies, seeing them as a tool for improving healthcare and for really pushing medical knowledge forward.
That all sounds really promising. But we talked earlier about these cultural and religious barriers, especially in Turkey. How do you see those being, addressed in the future?
That's a really important question. And it's where things get a little trickier, to be honest. To overcome these beliefs, these deeply held beliefs, it takes a lot of sensitivity. It takes education.
Mm.
It takes a willingness to just, have open, honest conversations where everyone feels respected. It's not about saying those beliefs are wrong or unimportant. It's about finding ways to bridge that gap, the gap between what science tells us and what people value culturally.
So it's not just about pushing autopsies on people. It's about honoring their traditions while also showing them how autopsies can be helpful. Sounds like a pretty delicate balance.
It is. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes everyone working together, doctors, religious leaders, the public. It's about finding that sweet spot where everyone feels heard, where decisions about healthcare are made with both knowledge and compassion.
So it sounds like there's definitely hope for the future of autopsies, but there are some big challenges too. It's more like, well, a journey, not a destination, right? We don't really know what the future holds.
That's a great way to put it. The future of autopsies is definitely, well, it's still being written. It's all these things swirling together, cultural beliefs, new technologies, the way medicine is practiced, what society values. But I am optimistic. If we keep putting in the effort, if we keep talking openly and honestly, and if we stay focused on scientific progress, but also on respecting different cultures, well, I think we can create a future where autopsies have a bigger role in healthcare and in how we understand, this amazing human body we all have.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive. It's kind of amazing to think about how something like autopsies, something we don't often think about, can be connected to so much history, culture, ethics, even what it means to be human.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? It shows you just how complex the human experience is and how powerful science can be when it's done right.
So to wrap things up, for everyone listening out there, what does all this mean for you? Well, next time you hear the word autopsy, we hope you'll think a little deeper. Go beyond that first image that pops into your mind. Think about the history, the science, the ethics, the potential benefits, not just for individuals, but for all of us.
It's about seeing autopsies as, well, as a starting point, not just an ending. A way to unlock knowledge, to learn more about diseases, improve how we take care of each other, and maybe even come to a deeper understanding of life and death.
So much to think about. If this has sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. Keep exploring. What questions do you have now? What about health, culture, history, anything really? What do you want to learn more about? Let us know. We're always excited to hear from our listeners and dive into something new.
And remember, knowledge is meant to be shared, so don't be afraid to reach out to keep the conversation going.
Until then, keep diving deep. There's a whole world out there waiting to be discovered, and we're here to help you explore it. Thanks for listening.